Clara was on her knees in the dirt. Her hands were tied behind her back. A woman stood over her with a pair of scissors, the blades already open. "Hold still, witch." The first cut sounded loud in the cold air. A thick lock of Clara's dark hair slid down her cheek and fell into the mud. Then another, and another. Her hair fell like rain while the hospital staff watched. Nurses in starched caps, orderlies with rough hands, men in clean coats. No one moved, no one spoke up. They just watched them shear her like an animal. "Higher," a man's voice said calmly. "Make sure everyone can see what she is." The scissors lifted for the next cut. "Put those scissors in her hair again," a new voice drawled from behind the crowd, "and you'll be picking your teeth out of the dirt beside her." Everything stopped. The matron froze, blades hovering over Clara's scalp. The circle of nurses turned. The men in coats stiffened. Clara didn't turn. She couldn't. Rope bit into her wrists. Hair clung to her. Wet cheeks. Boot steps, slow, heavy. A pair of worn boots stepped into her line of vision. Dusty, spurred, not city shoes. He stopped close enough that his shadow fell over her. "Who the devil are you?" the man with the calm voice demanded. The newcomer ignored him. "Ma'am," he said to the matron, "I'm going to ask you real polite to take a big step back from the lady on the ground." His tone was mild. His hand resting on the butt of the gun at his hip was not. The woman above Clara trembled. "The judge said—" I heard what he said. The stranger's boots shifted. "Now you're hearing me. Scissors, away from her, now!" The metal at Clara's nape vanished. The matron stumbled back. Cold air hit Clara's shorn neck, and she sucked in a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You are interfering with a lawful punishment," the judge said, stepping forward. His black coat cut a clean line through the dingy courtyard. "This woman endangered a child's life. She will be marked so no one else is fooled by her lies." The rancher finally looked at him. Clara saw his eyes then. Gray. Sharp. "That right?" he asked. "You see her give the child laudanum? See her put a knife in the wrong place? What exactly did you see with your own eyes, Your Honor?" A murmur went through the crowd. "I am not required to justify my decisions to a stranger," the judge snapped. "This is my town. These are my people. That girl is a danger to them." The rancher's mouth tightened. "She's bleeding," he said flatly. "On her knees in the dirt, tied up, surrounded. Only danger I see is you. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to my channel and comment your city below. Let's see how far Clara's story travels across the world." The judge's face darkened. "Untie her. If this fool wants to waste his breath, he can do it in a proper courtroom. We are finished here." No one moved. The rancher's gaze swept over the circle. "Any of you going to tell me why you're cutting the hair off a bound? Woman in a yard like you're shaming livestock at market?" Silence. Clara heard her own heartbeat, loud in her ears, felt every eye swing back to her. Her father had always said, "When a man abuses his power, make him explain it out loud." Most can't. The judge lifted his chin. She pretended to be a doctor, a woman with no license, no proper training. A child died under her hands. Clara found her voice. "She died because you cut the hospital budget and we ran out of clean bandages and carbolic," she said, words scraping her throat raw. She raised her head and looked straight at him. "You refused my request for more. I begged you, in writing." The rancher's eyes flicked to her, surprised. The crowd rustled. "Lies!" the matron spat. Clara didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on the judge, the way her father had taught her to look at a wound she meant to treat. "You signed off on the laudanum dose, matron. Your handwriting," she said, voice steadying. "You pushed it higher than I. Advised because the child was too loud for the ward." A flush rose on the older woman's throat. The rancher's hand flexed on his gun. "Well," he said quietly, "sounds to me like there's a sight more to talk about than a haircut." The judge's patience snapped. "Enough," he barked. "Untie her and get her off my property. She is dismissed from service and barred from practice, and you," he stabbed a finger at the rancher, "will take your interference and your dust and leave my town before sundown." A rough laugh escaped the rancher. Your town? He tilted his head. Funny. I saw a government seal on the courthouse. Didn't say property of Judge. What was it again? Whitfield. Judge Edwin Harlan Whitfield. Right. The rancher nodded once, as if committing the name to memory. Good to meet you, Judge Whitfield. Name's Nate Holbrook. He stepped closer to Clara, enough that she could smell leather and horse and cold air instead of disinfectant. You got a name, miss? He asked, voice dipping just for her. Her throat tightened. She hadn't heard anyone ask that since they dragged her out here. Clara Mercer, she said. Daughter of Dr. Thomas Mercer. Something flickered in his eyes at the title. Doctor's girl, he murmured. Figures. He raised his voice. All right then. I'm taking Miss Mercer out of here. Anyone wants to stop me? Go ahead and try. Two orderlies shifted, glancing between the gun at his hip and the judge's darkening expression. No one stepped forward. Untie her, Nate said. This time, they moved. The rope fell away from her wrists. Pins and needles shot through her fingers. Nate reached down a hand without looking away from Whitfield. Clara hesitated. Every sensible part of her said this was madness. Trading one man's power for another's. Letting a stranger write the next line of her story. But her father had also taught her to recognize when a patient was bleeding out. Boston was bleeding her out. She put her hand in his. His grip was warm, steady, pulling her up like she weighed nothing at all. Her legs shook. Nate slid an arm around her waist to keep her from falling. Easy now, he said under his breath. I've got you. She hated how good that felt. Judge, he called, still holding her. If you had proof she killed that child, you'd be parading it, not cutting her hair in a backyard. You want to come after her, you'll have to go through me. And I don't hide behind scissors. Whitfield's eyes went flat and dangerous. This isn't finished, he said. Nate smiled without any humor at all. Didn't figure it was. He tipped his hat to the silent nurses, turned Clara toward the open gate, and walked her out. She didn't look back. Her father's voice walked with her instead, the way it had through every ward and every long night. Do not look away from pain, Clara. Learn from it. Fine. She was learning. Boston would rather break her than let her heal. So she would go where men like Whitfield didn't own the ground and the sky. And she would find a way to make her father's legacy mean something that no judge, no scissors, and no crowd of cowards could ever cut away. Not ever. The wagon rattled over frozen ruts, each jolt sending pain through Clara's skull. She sat on the bench beside Nate, wrapped in a coat that wasn't hers, smelling of horse and leather and someone else's life. Her hands were free. Her hair was gone. Boston was disappearing behind them, smoke rising from 1,000 chimneys into the gray January sky. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt hollow. Nate hadn't spoken since they'd left the hospital courtyard. He drove with his eyes on the road, jaw tight, one hand loose on the reins. The gun still sat at his hip. Clara touched the back of her neck. Her fingers found raw skin where the scissors had cut too close. There's a boarding house 2 miles out, Nate said finally, voice rough from disuse. Run by a widow. She won't ask questions. Clara nodded. Words felt too heavy to lift. You got people in Boston? He asked. Family? Someone who'll come looking for you? She almost laughed. No, she said. No one. He glanced at her, something unreadable crossing his face. Then who was that man? The judge. Clara's throat tightened. Someone who wants me gone. I got that part. Nate's tone was dry. What I'm asking is why. The boarding house was small, clean, and blessedly warm. The widow, Mrs. Brennan, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, took one look at Clara's shorn head and Nate's grim expression and asked no questions at all. She showed them to a room on the 2nd floor, left a basin of water and a towel, and closed the door softly behind her. Clara sank onto the edge of the narrow bed. Nate stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the road. You going to tell me what's really happening? He asked. Clara stared at her hands. They were shaking. "My father died 6 months ago," she said quietly. Nate turned. "Dr. Thomas Mercer," she continued. "He was a surgeon. A good one. He trained me, taught me everything he knew. And the judge didn't like that. The judge didn't care." Clara's voice hardened. "Not until my father's will was read." She could still see the lawyer's office, the dark wood paneling, the smell of old paper and pipe smoke, her Uncle Silas sitting across from her, face tight with barely concealed rage. "To my daughter, Clara Mercer, I leave my house on Beacon Street, my savings, and my entire medical library, trusting that she will use them to continue the work we began together." Silas had stood up so fast his chair had fallen backward. "My father left me everything," Clara said. "The house, his savings, his books, everything." Nate's eyes narrowed. "And someone wanted it. My uncle, Silas Mercer." She spat the name like poison. "My father's younger brother. He thought the inheritance should go to him, the male heir, the responsible party. But your father didn't see it that way. My father saw Silas for exactly what he was." Clara's hands curled into fists. "A gambler, a drunk, a man who'd spent his own inheritance at card tables and brothels before he was 30. If you're wondering how far Silas will go to steal what's not his, drop a comment with your guess. And subscribe so you don't miss what happens next." Nate pulled a chair over and sat down, elbows on his knees. "So your uncle wants the money," he said. "What's the judge got to do with it?" Clara met his eyes. Silas couldn't just take it. The will was legal, witnessed, filed, so he needed another way. "He needed you gone. He needed me discredited." Clara's voice shook. "Declared unfit, dangerous, insane if he could manage it." Nate's jaw tightened. "Judge Whitfield is Silas's friend," Clara continued. "They drink together, play cards together, and Whitfield has power, influence. He sits on the board of the charity hospital where I worked." "Worked," Nate repeated. "I was a nurse there, officially." Clara's throat burned. "But I did more. I treated patients. I assisted in surgeries. I prescribed medication when the doctors were too drunk or too tired to do it themselves. And no one stopped you. No one cared." Clara's voice cracked. "Not until a child died." The room went very quiet. "Her name was Margaret," Clara whispered. 8 years old. Fever. I treated her the same way I'd treated a dozen others, but the matron had signed off on a laudanum dose that was too high. I reduced it. I documented it. I did everything right. But the child still died. She died because the bandages were filthy, because the hospital had no money for proper disinfectant, because Judge Whitfield cut the budget to line his own pockets." Clara's hands shook. "But he needed someone to blame, and Silas gave him a name." Nate swore under his breath. "They said I'd overstepped," Clara continued, "that I'd pretended to be a doctor, that I'd endangered her life with my delusions of competence. And the staff believed it. The staff was terrified." Clara's voice went flat. "Whitfield threatened to shut the hospital down if anyone spoke up for me. So they didn't." Nate stood, pacing to the window and back. "Where's the will now?" he asked. "The one your father left." Clara's stomach dropped. "In my room," she said. "At the hospital." Nate stopped. "You left it there." "I didn't have a choice." Panic crept into her voice. "They dragged me out in the middle of the night. I didn't have time to—" "So Whitfield has it now." Clara closed her eyes. "Probably. And without it, you can't prove the inheritance is yours." "No." Nate swore again, longer this time. Clara stood, legs unsteady. "I know how this looks. I know you don't owe me anything. You can leave. I won't—" "Sit down," Nate said. "I'm not—" "Sit down!" His voice was firm, but not unkind. Clara sat. Nate crouched in front of her, gray eyes level with hers. "I didn't pull you out of that courtyard to dump you at the first boarding house I found," he said. "I'm not that kind of man. You don't know me. I know enough." He held her gaze. "I know you stood up to a judge with scissors at your neck. I know you didn't beg or cry or make yourself small. I know you told the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it." Clara's throat tightened. "My father used to say that," she whispered. "He'd say, 'Do not look away from pain, Clara. Learn from it.'" Nate's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Smart man." He was. Nate stood, offering his hand again. "Then let's make sure his legacy doesn't end up in your uncle's pocket." Clara stared at his hand. Calloused, steady, offered without hesitation. She thought of her father's voice, his hands guiding hers over a patient's wound, his belief that she could be more than the world wanted to let her be. She took Nate's hand and stood. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Nate's expression darkened, something old and painful flickering behind his eyes. "Because I know what it's like when powerful men decide you're in their way," he said quietly. "And I know what it costs to stand alone." He released her hand but didn't step back. "You're not alone anymore, Clara Mercer." For the first time since her father died, Clara felt something other than fear. She felt the faint, fragile beginning of hope. "What do we do now?" she asked. Nate's jaw set. "Now?" He reached for his hat. "We figure out how to get that will back, and we make sure your uncle and his judge friend learn a lesson about taking things that don't belong to them." Clara's hand stopped shaking. Her father had taught her to face pain and learn from it. Fine. She'd learned that Boston would rather destroy her than let her heal. She'd learned that men like Silas and Whitfield believed power made them untouchable. But they hadn't learned about her yet, and they were about to. Silas Mercer signed his name with a flourish. The ink was still wet when he slid the document across the polished desk to Judge Whitfield. "There," he said, satisfaction thick in his voice. "That should do it." Whitfield picked up the paper, scanning the lines with cold, practiced eyes. "Dr. Edmund Carr and Dr. Philip Hastings," he read aloud, "both willing to testify that your niece suffers from acute hysteria and delusions of medical competence. Both paid handsomely for their professional opinions," Silas corrected, leaning back in the leather chair. He swirled the whiskey in his glass. "Carr's got gambling debts. Hastings likes his mistress comfortable. Everyone has a price, Edwin." Whitfield set the document down. "And the petition?" "Filed this morning." Silas smiled. "Requesting the court commit Clara Mercer to the Boston Asylum for the Insane, with myself appointed as her legal guardian during her unfortunate incapacity. Which gives you control of the estate. Which gives me what should have been mine from the start." Silas's smile hardened. "My brother was a fool, filling a girl's head with medical nonsense, leaving everything to her like she was a son." Whitfield poured himself a drink. "The marshal leaves at dawn," he said. "He'll have her in custody by tomorrow afternoon." Silas raised his glass. "To family legacies," he said, "and to men wise enough to correct their brother's mistakes." They drank. Neither man noticed the young clerk standing frozen in the hallway outside, his hand still raised to knock. Clara was washing her face in the basin when she heard the horse, fast, urgent. She looked out the window and saw a rider coming up the road, his coat flapping behind him. Nate was already at the door by the time the man dismounted. Clara dried her hands and came down the stairs. The rider was young, barely 20, with ink stains on his fingers and panic in his eyes. "Miss Mercer?" he gasped, out of breath. "I'm Clara Mercer." The young man pulled off his cap. "My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm a clerk at the courthouse." He glanced at Nate, then back to Clara. "I knew your father. He treated my mother when no other doctor would." Clara's chest tightened. "What's happened?" Thomas pulled a folded paper from inside his coat. "Your uncle filed a petition this morning," he said, handing it to her. "I made a copy before the judge sealed it." Clara unfolded the paper with shaking hands. Nate moved to stand beside her, reading over her shoulder. The words blurred and sharpened. Petition for involuntary commitment. Clara Mercer, age 23, suffering from acute hysteria, delusions of medical competence, and behavior dangerous to herself and others. Signed affidavits from Dr. Edmund Carr and Dr. Philip Hastings. Petitioner Silas Mercer requests appointment as legal guardian during period of incapacity. Clara's vision tunneled. They're going to lock me up, she whispered. There's more, Thomas said quietly. A marshal's been dispatched. He'll be here by tomorrow afternoon to take you into custody. Nate swore, low and vicious. Clara read the document, again, forcing herself to see every word. Hysteria, delusions, dangerous. The same words they'd used in the courtyard. But now they were legal, official, signed by doctors she'd never even met. Carr and Hastings, she said, voice hollow. I know those names. They work at the hospital? No. Clara's hands curled around the paper. They're private physicians, expensive ones. They wouldn't know me if they passed me on the street. Then how? Silas paid them. The words tasted like ash. He paid them to lie. If you think Silas deserves what's coming to him, comment justice below and subscribe to see how Clara fights back. Thomas shifted his weight. There's something else, Miss Mercer, he said. I was outside the judge's office when they were talking. Your uncle, he said this was about the inheritance. About your father's will. Clara closed her eyes. Of course it is. He said your father was a fool for leaving everything to you. Thomas's voice shook with anger. He said he was correcting his brother's mistake. Nate's hand moved to his gun. Easy, Clara said quietly, though her own rage was a living thing clawing at her ribs. She could see Silas at the funeral, his black coat, his solemn face, his hand on her shoulder as they stood beside the grave. Your father would want me to look after you, Clara. You're not alone. His voice had been so soft, so kind. She'd believed him. She'd actually believed that family meant something to him. How long do we have? Nate asked Thomas. The marshal leaves at dawn. He'll be here by mid-afternoon tomorrow, maybe sooner if he rides hard. And if he takes her? Thomas's face went grim. The asylum doesn't let people out easily, Mr. Holbrook. Especially women. Especially women whose guardians don't want them released. Clara felt the walls closing in. Once they locked her up, Silas would have everything. The house, the money, her father's books. And she would disappear into a building full of screaming and laudanum and doctors who didn't care whether you were sane or not. No, she said. Both men looked at her. No, Clara repeated louder. She straightened, forcing steel into her spine. I'm not running, and I'm not letting them lock me away like I'm broken. Clara, my father taught me to face pain and learn from it, she said, meeting Nate's eyes. I've learned enough. Silas wants to call me insane? Fine. Let him try to prove it in front of people who actually know me. Nate studied her face. You want to fight this? I want to destroy him. Clara's voice didn't shake. I want to stand in front of a judge, a real one, not Whitfield, and show everyone exactly what Silas Mercer is. Thomas stepped forward. You'd need witnesses, he said. People who can testify that you're competent, that you worked as a nurse, that you saved lives. The hospital staff won't talk, Clara said bitterly. Whitfield made sure of that. Then we find people outside the hospital, Nate said. Patients you treated, families you helped. Clara's mind raced. There had been others, people her father had treated in their homes, people she'd visited after he died, checking wounds, changing bandages, delivering medicine. Mrs. Callahan, she said suddenly, on Tremont Street. I treated her son's broken arm after my father died. And the Donnelly family. I helped deliver their baby when the midwife was drunk. Thomas pulled out a pencil and a scrap of paper. Give me names, he said. I'll find them. You do that? Clara asked. Risk your position. Thomas's jaw set. Your father saved my mother's life when she had cholera, he said. Every other doctor in Boston said she was too poor, too Irish, too far gone. Your father came anyway. He didn't charge us a cent. His eyes shone. I'm not letting his daughter get locked up by a man who doesn't deserve to speak his name. Clara's throat burned. Thank you, she whispered. Nate put a hand on Thomas's shoulder. We'll need more. Then witnesses, he said. We'll need a lawyer. Someone who's not afraid of Whitfield. I know someone, Nate said. A man in Cambridge. He's sharp, honest, and he owes me a favor. What kind of favor? Nate's expression darkened. The kind you don't forget. He turned to Clara. I'll ride out tonight. Find him. Bring him back before the marshal arrives. That's a hard ride in the dark. I've done harder. Nate's gray eyes held hers. You're not facing this alone, Clara. I told you that. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he'd done enough, that this wasn't his fight. But the truth was, she needed him. And for the first time in 6 months, she wasn't ashamed to admit it. All right, she said. Nate nodded once, then looked at Thomas. You get those witnesses. I'll get the lawyer. We meet back here tomorrow morning. And if the marshal comes early? Thomas asked. Nate's hand rested on his gun. Then he'll have to go through me first. After Thomas left, Clara stood at the window watching the road. Nate was packing his saddlebag, checking his gun, preparing to ride into the night for her. A stranger, a man who owed her nothing. Why are you doing this? She asked without turning around. Nate paused. I told you, I know what it's like when powerful men... No! Clara turned to face him. Why are you really doing this? Nate's jaw worked. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, I had a brother once, he said quietly. Younger than me. Good kid, smart. He got on the wrong side of a land baron back in Kansas. Man wanted our ranch. My brother wouldn't sell. Clara's chest tightened. They framed him for cattle theft, Nate continued, voice flat. Had a judge in their pocket, just like Whitfield. I tried to fight it, tried to get witnesses, tried to prove he was innocent. What happened? Nate's eyes were distant, haunted. They hanged him before I could. The room went very quiet. I'm sorry, Clara whispered. Nate shook his head. I swore I'd never. Stand by and watch it happen again, he said. So when I saw you in that courtyard, on your knees, with no one willing to speak up, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Clara crossed the room and put her hand on his arm. We're going to win this, she said. Nate looked down at her hand, then up at her face. Yeah, he said. We are. He picked up his saddlebag and headed for the door. Nate, Clara called. He stopped. Thank you, she said. For your brother and for me. Nate's expression softened just a fraction. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow, we go to war. Then he was gone, boots heavy on the stairs, the door closing behind him. Clara stood alone in the small room. Outside, she heard his horse's hooves on the frozen road, fading into the night. She looked down at the petition still clutched in her hand. Hysteria, delusions, dangerous. Silas thought he could erase her with lies and bribes and a few signatures. He thought she would disappear quietly into an asylum and let him take everything her father had built. He was wrong. Clara folded the document carefully and set it on the table. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, steady and sure. Do not look away from pain, Clara. Learn from it. She'd learned. Now it was time to teach Silas Mercer what happened when you betrayed the daughter of Thomas Mercer, and she was going to make sure he never forgot the lesson. Clara woke to the sound of horses. Too many horses. She sat up in the dark, heart already pounding. Voices outside, low, urgent, boots on gravel, the creak of the boarding house gate. She threw off the blanket and moved to the window. 4 men, maybe 5, white coats, pale in the moonlight. One carried a leather case, another a length of rope. Clara's blood turned to ice. They weren't supposed to come until tomorrow. Nate wasn't back yet. A fist pounded on the front door below. Open up! We have a warrant for Clara Mercer! Clara's hands shook as she grabbed her father's medical bag from beside the bed. She heard Mrs. Brennan's voice, muffled through the floorboards. There's no one here by that name. We have information she's staying in this house. Step aside, ma'am. I'll do no such thing. You show me a proper warrant signed by... The sound of wood splintering. They'd kicked the door in. Clara ran. She shoved the window open. Cold air hit her face like a slap. She was still in her nightgown, barefoot, but there was no time. She threw the medical bag out first, heard it hit the ground below. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. "Check every room!" Clara climbed onto the windowsill, 2 stories up. A sloped roof below, then a drop to the alley. She didn't think. She jumped. Her feet hit the shingles and slid. She scrabbled for purchase, nails scraping, nightgown tearing. Momentum carried her to the edge. She dropped, hit the ground hard. Pain shot through her ankle. She bit down on a scream. Above, a man's face appeared in the window. "She's running! Back alley!" Clara grabbed the bag and ran. The alley was narrow, dark, lined with trash and broken crates. Her bare feet found every sharp edge. Glass, nails, ice, blood slicked the ground behind her. She didn't stop. Behind her, boots hit the alley. "There!" She burst onto the street. A wagon rattled past. A drunk stumbled out of a tavern. No one looked at her. No one cared. Clara ducked into another alley, pressing herself against the wall. Her breath came in ragged gasps, visible in the freezing air. The men's voices echoed closer. "Split up. She can't have gone far." She forced herself to move, through a gap between buildings, over a fence that tore her nightgown further, past a dog that barked once, then went silent. Her father's bag banged against her hip with every step. Heavy, awkward. She should drop it. She couldn't. It was all she had left of him. If you've ever had to run from something, comment Survivor below and subscribe to see how Clara makes it through the next 3 years. She found a stable on the edge of town. The door was unlocked. Inside, horses shifted in their stalls, disturbed by her entrance. Clara collapsed in an empty corner behind a pile of hay. Her whole body shook. Cold, shock, pain. She looked down at her feet. Blood, cuts, bruises already forming. Her nightgown was torn at the shoulder, filthy with mud and worse. She clutched the medical bag to her chest. Outside, she heard voices passing. "Check the stables. Already did. Nothing. Whitfield's going to have our heads if we don't find her. She's a girl in a nightgown in January. She won't last the night." The voices faded. Clara pressed her face against the leather of the bag. It smelled like her father. Carbolic acid, leather oil, old paper. She remembered his study, the fire always burning, books stacked on every surface, his voice, patient and steady, reading aloud from a medical text while she took notes. The body is resilient, Clara. It can survive remarkable trauma. But the mind must be strong or the body will fail. She'd felt so safe in that room, so certain that the world made sense, that good people were rewarded and bad people were punished. That family meant something. Now she was hiding in a stable like an animal, hunted by her own blood, branded as insane by men who'd never met her, running from an asylum that would swallow her whole and never let her out. A sob tore out of her throat. She clamped a hand over her mouth, but it was too late. The grief came in waves, for her father, for the life she'd had, for the inheritance she'd never see, for Nate, who'd ridden out to help her and would come back to find her gone. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she wiped her face with the torn hem of her nightgown and opened the medical bag. Inside, bandages, a scalpel, a bottle of carbolic acid, a few vials of medicine, and tucked in the bottom, a folded piece of paper, her father's handwriting. "Clara, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from what's coming. Your uncle will try to take what I've left you. Don't let him. You are stronger than he knows, stronger than you know. Do not look away from pain, Clara. Learn from it. And remember, you are my legacy. Not the house, not the money. You make me proud." Father Clara's hands shook as she refolded the letter. She tucked it back into the bag. Then she tore a strip from her nightgown and began wrapping her feet. Her father had taught her to treat wounds, to survive. She would not die in this stable. She would not let Silas win. If they wanted to hunt her, fine, she would run. And she would learn. Days became weeks, weeks became months. Clara Mercer disappeared into the cracks of America. She took new names in every town. Mary, Anne, Elizabeth, Jane. She worked as a nurse when she could, A maid when she couldn't, a seamstress when she was desperate. She kept her father's bag hidden. She kept moving. In Philadelphia, she treated a factory worker's infected hand and left before dawn when she saw a man asking questions about a girl from Boston. In Pittsburgh, she delivered a baby in a tenement and was paid in bread and a pair of shoes. In Cincinnati, she worked in a hospital for 3 months under the name Sarah Brown, until a visiting doctor recognized her father's handwriting in her notes. She ran again, always running, always one step ahead of the men Silas sent. The Pinkertons with their sketches and their questions, the Marshalls with their warrants. The rumors that followed her like ghosts. Dangerous, insane, wanted. She learned to sleep light, to trust no one, to disappear. 3 years. 3 years of looking over her shoulder, 3 years of wondering if today would be the day they finally caught her. And then, in a dusty town in the Wyoming Territory called Stillwater Creek, her luck ran out. She'd been working at a boarding house keeping her head down, using the name Clara Brown. But someone had seen her treat a child's fever. Someone had talked, and Judge Harlan Whitfield, who'd moved west with his ambitions and his corruption intact, had heard. That's how she ended up in the alley behind the general store, on her knees, scissors at her head, hair falling like rain, the crowd watching and doing nothing. 3 years of running, and it had all led back to this. Back to the same humiliation, the same injustice, the same men who believed they could break her. But they'd forgotten something. Clara Mercer had spent 3 years learning to survive, learning to fight, learning that pain was a teacher, and she'd been an excellent student. So when the rancher with the gray eyes and the steady voice said, "She's coming with me," Clara didn't hesitate. She took his hand, and she decided that running was over. Now it was time to fight back. Her father had taught her to face pain and learn from it. She'd learned. And Silas Mercer, Judge Whitfield, and every man who'd tried to destroy her was about to find out exactly what the daughter of Dr. Thomas Mercer had become. A survivor, a fighter, and a woman who would not be broken. Not ever again. She was Mary Brown in Philadelphia, a kitchen maid in a boarding house on Chestnut Street, scrubbing pots until her hands cracked and bled. The smell of lye soap and boiled cabbage. The sound of the landlady's sharp voice. The cold attic room where she slept with her shoes on and her father's bag under the pillow. She lasted 3 months before a man came asking questions about a girl from Boston. She was Ann Carter in Pittsburgh, a seamstress in a textile factory, hunched over a machine 12 hours a day. The rhythmic clatter of needles. The tired voices of women who'd given up dreaming. The lint in her lungs and the ache in her spine. She lasted 4 months before she saw her own face on a wanted poster in the factory foreman's office. She was Sarah Brown in Cincinnati, a nurse in a charity hospital, changing bandages and emptying bedpans. The metallic smell of blood and carbolic acid. The moans of patients no one else would touch. The brief, dangerous joy of doing the work she was born to do. She lasted 6 months before a visiting doctor recognized her father's handwriting in her notes. 6 months, a year, 18 months. The names blurred together. The towns became interchangeable. Clara Mercer disappeared into the cracks of America, and no one noticed. No one cared, except the men who hunted her. Summer, 1879, St. Louis. The cholera came with the heat. It swept through the tenements along the river like wildfire, killing the poor, the weak, the unlucky. The hospitals overflowed. The morgues ran out of space. The city converted a warehouse on the waterfront into a makeshift cholera ward and begged for volunteers. Clara, calling herself Elizabeth Hayes, was one of the first to arrive. The warehouse was hell. Rows of cots packed so close you could barely walk between them. The stench of vomit and diarrhea and death. The sound of people crying for water, for God, for mercy. Most of the volunteers lasted a day. Clara stayed. She worked 18-hour shifts, moving from patient to patient with her father's bag and her father's training. She mixed rehydration solutions the way he'd taught her, Clean water, salt, sugar, measured precisely. She held cups to cracked lips and counted swallows. She checked pulses and skin tone and the color of fingernails. She knew who would live and who wouldn't. And she stayed with the ones who wouldn't, holding their hands, whispering that they weren't alone. The other nurses watched her with a mixture of awe and suspicion. "Where'd you train?" one asked. "My father was a doctor," Clara said. It was the truth. "Mostly. You're better than half the doctors here." Clara didn't answer. She kept her head down and her hands busy. For 3 weeks, she lived in that warehouse, sleeping on a cot in the corner when exhaustion forced her too, eating whatever the church ladies brought, saving lives. It felt like coming home, like being herself again. And that was the problem. If you think Clara deserves a moment of peace, comment REST below and subscribe to see if she ever finds it. The doctor arrived on a Tuesday. Dr. James Whitmore, visiting from Boston to observe the city's response to the outbreak. Clara saw him enter the ward and felt ice in her veins. She knew that walk, that posture. Boston money, Boston medicine. She turned away, pulling her cap lower over her face. But he was making rounds, observing the nurses, asking questions. She couldn't avoid him forever. He stopped at her station while she was treating a young woman, barely conscious, lips blue with dehydration. Clara worked quickly, efficiently, checking the woman's pulse, adjusting the rehydration drip she'd rigged from a glass bottle and rubber tubing. "Interesting technique," Dr. Whitmore said. Clara didn't look up. "It works. I can see that." He watched her hands. "You're using the Mercer method." Clara's heart stopped. "I don't know what that is," she said. "Dr. Thomas Mercer, Boston surgeon, he pioneered a rehydration protocol for cholera patients." Dr. Whitmore's voice was thoughtful. "I studied under him briefly. Brilliant man. Died a few years ago." Clara's hands didn't shake. She'd learned not to let them. "I read about it in a medical journal," she lied. "Did you?" It wasn't a question. Dr. Whitmore circled her station slowly, watching her work. "You have his precision," he said. "His attention to detail. The way you measure, it's exact. Most nurses estimate. You don't." Clara finished adjusting the drip and stood. "I should check on the other patients. He had a daughter, you know." Dr. Whitmore's voice followed her. "Clara, she worked with him. Some said she was as skilled as he was. Some said she was dangerous, delusional." Clara kept walking. "There was a scandal," he continued. "She disappeared. There's still a warrant out for her arrest." Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. She reached the next cot and knelt beside a child, a boy no older than 8. Behind her, Dr. Whitmore's footsteps approached. "You remind me of her," he said quietly. Clara looked up at him. Their eyes met. She saw the moment he knew. "Elizabeth Hayes," he said slowly. "Is that really your name?" Clara stood. Around them, patients moaned. Nurses hurried past. No one was paying attention. "Yes," Clara said. Dr. Whitmore studied her face. "I don't believe you." Clara picked up her father's bag. "Believe what you want." She walked toward the door. "If you're her," Dr. Whitmore called after her, "you should know. Your uncle is still looking, and he's offering a reward." Clara didn't stop. She walked out of the warehouse into the brutal St. Louis heat. Behind her, 3 weeks of work, 3 weeks of lives saved, 3 weeks of being herself. And Margaret, sweet, earnest Margaret, the young nurse who'd shared her lunch and asked Clara to teach her the rehydration technique, who'd told Clara she was the best nurse she'd ever worked with, who'd started to feel like a friend. Clara couldn't even say goodbye. She just disappeared. Again. In the bathroom of a train station 50 miles west, Clara cut her hair. She used her father's scalpel, the blade sharp and sure. Long dark strands fell into the sink. She cut it short, severe, unfeminine. In the mirror, a stranger stared back, hollow-eyed, thin, hard. She barely recognized herself. Good. She burned her nurse's uniform in the stove of a boarding house that didn't ask questions. She bought men's work clothes from a second-hand shop, rough trousers, a plain shirt, a coat with deep pockets. She chose a new name, Clara Brown, close enough to remember, far enough to hide. She counted the money in her father's bag, $11.30, enough to keep running. She'd been running for 2 years. She was so tired, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Silas's face, heard Judge Whitfield's voice, remembered the feel of scissors at her neck. Her father's letter was creased and soft from being read and reread. Do not look away from pain, Clara. Learn from it. She'd learned. She'd learned that the world didn't care about justice, that powerful men could destroy you with a signature and a lie. That survival meant becoming someone else, someone harder, someone who didn't trust, someone who didn't stay. She'd learned to read a room in seconds, who was dangerous, who was desperate, who might talk. She'd learned to sleep light and wake fast. She'd learned to lie without hesitation. She'd learned to be invisible. But she'd also learned her father's lessons were true. The body could survive remarkable trauma, if the mind was strong enough. And Clara's mind was iron now, forged in 3 years of running, 3 years of fear, 3 years of refusing to break. Silas wanted her inheritance. Whitfield wanted her silenced. They both wanted her erased, but she was still here, still breathing, still fighting. And one day, she would stop running. One day she would turn around and face them. One day they would learn what they'd created. But that day wasn't today. Today she bought a ticket west, farther from Boston, farther from the men who hunted her. She ended up in the Wyoming Territory, a town called Stillwater Creek. Small, dusty, forgettable, perfect. She found work at a boarding house, kept her head down, used the name Clara Brown. It was a mistake. She knew it the moment she said it, too close to her real name. But she was tired, 3 years tired, bone deep, soul tired. And when the boarding house owner's daughter fell sick with fever, Clara couldn't help herself. She treated the child, used her father's techniques, saved her life. The mother wept with gratitude. The father told everyone in town about the miracle worker named Clara. And someone listened. Someone who knew Judge Harlan. Whitfield. Who knew Whitfield had moved west? Who knew there was a reward for information about a girl from Boston? That's how Clara ended up in the alley behind the general store. On her knees, scissors at her head, hair falling like rain. 3 years of running, and she'd finally made a mistake. 3 years of survival, and it had all come down to this. But she'd learned something in those 3 years. She'd learned that she was stronger than Silas knew, stronger than Whitfield believed, stronger than she'd ever imagined. So when the rancher with the gray eyes said, "She's coming with me," Clara didn't hesitate. She took his hand. Running was over. Now came something harder. Now came the fight. And Clara Mercer, who'd been Mary and Anne and Sarah and Elizabeth, was ready. She'd spent 3 years learning to survive. Now it was time to learn how to win. Judge Harlan Whitfield sat at his desk in Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory, and wrote. His handwriting was precise, efficient. The handwriting of a man who wielded power through paper and ink. He dipped his pen and began the next telegram. Sheriff Davis, stop Omaha. Nebraska, stop wanted female. Fugitive, stop Clara Mercer, age 23, stop escaped. Custody, Boston, Mass. Stop diagnosed acute hysteria. Stop dangerous to self and others. Stop may use aliases. Stop reward $200. Stop contact. Judge H. Whitfield, Cheyenne Wyoming. Stop. He signed it with a flourish and set it aside. 12 telegrams today. Sheriffs, hospital directors, boarding house associations, telegraph operators, all across the Western Territories, all with the same message. Clara Mercer was dangerous. Clara Mercer was insane. Clara Mercer must be found. Whitfield had been sending these telegrams for 3 years, ever since Silas Mercer had written to him, furious that his niece had escaped Boston, ever since Silas had promised him a percentage of the inheritance if he helped track her down. It was good business, and Whitfield was very good at business. He gathered the telegrams, and walked to the telegraph office himself. The operator knew him, respected him, never questioned. "Send these today," Whitfield said. "Yes, Your Honor." The telegrams went out. East, west, north, south. A web of lies spreading across America. And Clara Mercer, running blind, had no idea she was caught in it. In Denver, the telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Harrison, director of St. Luke's Hospital, read it over his breakfast coffee. Escaped lunatic. Dangerous. Maybe using aliases. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his desk drawer. That afternoon, a young woman came to his office. She was thin, tired-looking, but her eyes were sharp and her hands were steady. "I'm here about the nursing position," she said. "My name is Sarah Brown." Dr. Harrison studied her. Dark hair, cut short, plain dress, worn shoes, mid-20s. "Where did you train, Miss Brown?" "My father was a doctor. He taught me." Dr. Harrison's eyes narrowed. "And where is your father now?" "Dead, sir." "I see." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out the telegram. "Tell me, Miss Brown, have you ever been to Boston?" The woman's face went very still. "No, sir." "You're certain?" "Yes, sir." Dr. Harrison stood. "I'm afraid the position has been filled. Good day, Miss Brown." The woman didn't move. "I'm a good nurse," she said quietly. "I can provide references." "The position is filled." His voice was cold. "And I'd advise you to leave Denver, Miss Brown. Or whatever your real name is." The woman left without another word. Dr. Harrison watched her go, then filed the telegram under suspicious persons. He was a careful man, a cautious man, and he had no intention of harboring an escaped lunatic in his hospital. In Omaha, Sheriff Porter received his telegram on a Thursday. He pinned it to the board in his office, next to the other wanted notices. Clara Mercer, escaped lunatic, $200 reward. 2 days later, a woman came to his attention. Mrs. Garrett, who ran the boarding house on 5th Street, reported a suspicious lodger. "She's been treating sick folks," Mrs. Garrett said, wringing her hands. "Says she's a nurse, but she's got no credentials, and she's nervous, always looking over her shoulder." "What's her name?" Porter asked. "Elizabeth Hayes, but I don't think that's real." Porter pulled the telegram from his board. "What's she look like?" "Young, dark hair, cut short, thin, carries a leather medical bag everywhere." Porter stood. "Show me." They found the woman in her room, packing. She looked up when Porter opened the door, and he saw the fear flash across her face. "Elizabeth Hayes?" he said. "Yes. I need you to come with me, ma'am." "On what charge?" "Suspicion of being a fugitive from justice." The woman's eyes darted to the window. Porter saw it. "Don't," he warned. She ran anyway, straight to the window, bag in hand, climbing out onto the fire escape. Porter lunged, but she was fast. By the time he made it to the alley, she was gone. He swore and returned to his office. He sent a telegram to Judge Whitfield. Spotted in Omaha, stop escaped, stop heading west. Stop the hunt continued. In Stillwater Creek, the telegram arrived on a Monday. Mrs. Brennan, who ran the boarding house, read it twice. Then she looked up at the ceiling, toward the room where her new lodger was staying. Clara Brown. Quiet. Polite. Paid on time. And she'd saved Mrs. Brennan's daughter from a fever that would have killed her. Mrs. Brennan read the telegram again. Clara Mercer, escaped lunatic, dangerous, maybe using aliases. Reward $200. That was 6 months' income, maybe more. Mrs. Brennan folded the telegram and put it in her apron pocket. That evening, when Clara came down for supper, Mrs. Brennan was waiting. "I need to speak with you," she said. Clara set down her plate. "Of course." Mrs. Brennan pulled out the telegram. "Is this you?" Clara's face went white. She didn't answer. "I asked you a question," Mrs. Brennan said, voice rising. "Are you Clara Mercer?" You lied to me." Mrs. Brennan's hands shook. "You're a lunatic, an escaped patient. You could have hurt my daughter." "I saved your daughter," Clara said quietly. You're dangerous. I'm not. Clara's voice was steady, but her eyes were desperate. Mrs. Brennan, please. That telegram is a lie. I'm not insane. I'm not dangerous. I'm just a liar. Mrs. Brennan stepped back. Get out. Get out of my house before I call the sheriff. Clara stood slowly. Please, she whispered. I have nowhere else to go. That's not my problem. Mrs. Brennan pointed to the door. Out, now! Clara climbed the stairs to her room. She packed her father's bag with shaking hands. 3 years. 3 years of running, and it was always the same. The telegrams found her. The lies followed her. No matter how far she ran, Whitfield's web was already there, waiting. She left through the back door, into the alley, where Judge Whitfield's men were waiting. If you think Whitfield's web of lies is about to unravel, comment "Justice" below, and subscribe to see Clara take him down. After Nate pulled Clara from the alley, after they'd ridden to the widow's boarding house on the edge of town, Clara asked to go back. My things, she said. I left them. Nate hesitated, then nodded. They returned after dark. Mrs. Brennan's boarding house was quiet. Nate kept watch while Clara slipped in through the back. Her room had been searched, her few belongings scattered, but her father's bag was still there, hidden under the floorboard where she'd left it. She pulled it out and turned to leave. That's when she saw the telegram. It was on Mrs. Brennan's desk, left out in the open. Clara picked it up with trembling hands. Wanted, Clara Mercer, age 23. Escaped from custody in Boston, Massachusetts. Diagnosed with acute hysteria and delusions of medical competence. Dangerous to herself and others, may be using aliases. Mary Brown, Ann. Carter, Sarah Brown. Elizabeth Hayes, Clara Brown. Reward $200 for information. Contact Judge H. Whitfield, Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory. Clara stared at the paper. Every name, every alias she'd used, every town she'd run to, he knew. Whitfield knew all of it, and he'd been sending these telegrams everywhere. That's why the hospital in Denver had turned her away. Why the sheriff in Omaha had come for her. Why every time she thought she'd found safety, it crumbled. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was Whitfield. A systematic, coordinated hunt. A web of lies cast across the entire country. She'd never had a chance. Clara's hands shook so hard the paper rattled. 3 years of running, and she'd been running blind. Chased by telegrams she never saw. Betrayed by lies she couldn't fight. Branded as insane by a man who'd never met her. All so Silas could steal her inheritance. All so Whitfield could collect his share. The rage came like a wave. Hot, consuming, righteous. She crumpled the telegram in her fist. Nate was waiting outside. He saw her face and knew something had changed. What happened? Clara handed him the telegram. He read it by moonlight, his jaw tightening with every word. Son of a... He looked up at her. He's been doing this the whole time? Every town, every job, every time I thought I was safe. Clara's voice was flat. He made sure I could never stop running. Nate swore, low and vicious. How many of these has he sent? Dozens, maybe hundreds. Clara looked at the crumpled paper in Nate's hand. I can't outrun telegrams, Nate. I can't outrun lies that travel faster than I can. So we stop running. Clara laughed, bitter and broken. And do what? He's a judge. He has power, connections, money. I'm nobody, a fugitive, an escaped lunatic. You're not insane. It doesn't matter what I am. Clara's voice cracked. It matters what he says I am, and he's been saying it for 3 years to everyone who'll listen. Nate stepped closer. Then we make them listen to you instead. How? We fight him. Nate's voice was steel. Legally, publicly. We expose the lies. We prove you're competent. We show everyone what Silas and Whitfield really are. Clara wanted to believe him. But 3 years of running had taught her that wanting wasn't enough. They'll never believe me over a judge. They will if we give them proof. Nate folded the telegram carefully. This is evidence. Whitfield's been using his position to hunt you across state lines. That's abuse of power, maybe even criminal. And who's going to prosecute a judge? Someone who's not afraid of him. Nate's eyes were hard. "I told you I know a lawyer, a good one. He'll take this case." Clara looked at the telegram in Nate's hand. Her names, her aliases. Her 3 years of running, reduced to a list. "Do not look away from pain, Clara. Learn from it." Her father's voice, steady in her mind. She'd learned. She'd learned that running didn't work, that hiding didn't work, that trying to disappear only made Whitfield's lies more powerful. So maybe it was time to stop disappearing. Maybe it was time to stand in the light and make them see her. The real her. Not the lunatic from the telegrams, not the dangerous fugitive. Clara Mercer, daughter of Dr. Thomas Mercer, nurse, healer, survivor. "All right," she said quietly. Nate looked at her. "All right? We fight." Clara's voice was stronger now. "We gather evidence, we find witnesses, we expose Whitfield's lies and Silas's greed. We make them answer for what they've done." Nate's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's the spirit." Clara took the telegram from his hand and smoothed it out. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her father's bag. Evidence. Proof of the conspiracy. The first thread in Whitfield's web that she would pull until the whole thing unraveled. "Where do we start?" she asked. "We start with Thomas," Nate said. "The clerk. He's gathering. Witnesses. People you helped, people who know you're not insane. And then we ride to Cambridge, find my lawyer friend, file a lawsuit against Silas for fraud and against Whitfield for abuse of power. They'll fight back. Let them." Nate's eyes were cold. "I'm done watching powerful men destroy good people, and so are you." Clara looked at the boarding house behind them. 3 years ago, she'd run from Boston in her nightgown, terrified and alone. She'd spent 3 years learning to survive, learning to hide, learning to be invisible. But invisibility was just another kind of prison, and Clara Mercer was done being a prisoner. "Let's go," she said. They rode into the night. Behind them, Stillwater Creek slept, unaware that the hunted woman in their midst had just become the hunter. And Judge Harlan Whitfield, sitting in his office in Cheyenne, writing his telegrams and spinning his web, had no idea that one of the threads had just been cut. The web was unraveling, and Clara Mercer was coming for him. 3 days earlier, Clara stumbled into Stillwater Creek on a Tuesday in December. The wind cut through her coat like knives. Her fever had been climbing for 2 days, maybe 3. She'd lost track. The influenza had started in Omaha, the night she'd run from the sheriff. She'd been running ever since, through Nebraska, into Wyoming territory, town after town, each one colder and more desperate than the last. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her money was gone. Her father's bag felt like it weighed 100 pounds. 3 years of running had led to this. A dusty town at the edge of nowhere, and a body that couldn't run anymore. Stillwater Creek was small, remote, forgettable, perfect. Clara found a boarding house and paid for a week with the last of her coins. The owner, Mrs. Brennan, was kind, asked few questions. Clara gave her name as Clara Brown. It was a mistake. She was too tired to remember to lie completely, too sick to care. That night, Mrs. Brennan's daughter fell ill. High fever, convulsions. Mrs. Brennan pounded on Clara's door, desperate. "Please," she begged. "You said your father was a doctor. Please help her." Clara should have said no, should have stayed hidden. But the child was dying, and Clara couldn't look away from pain. She treated the girl through the night. Fever reduction, hydration, cool compresses, her father's methods. By morning, the fever had broken. The child would live. Mrs. Brennan wept with gratitude. "You saved her," she said. "You're a miracle worker." Clara packed her bag. "I should go." "Go? Why? Stay. Please, let me tell people what you did. You could work here, help folks." "No." Clara's voice was firm. "Don't tell anyone, please." But Mrs. Brennan had already told her husband. And her husband told the store owner. And by noon, half the town knew about Clara Brown, the miracle worker who'd saved the Brennan girl. Clara felt the walls closing in. She should run, But she was so tired, so sick, and she had nowhere left to go. Maybe, she thought, just maybe, this town would be different. Maybe she could rest, just for a few days. It was the last mistake she'd make. The telegram arrived at the telegraph office on Wednesday morning. Mr. Hutchins, the operator, read it twice before walking it over to Sheriff Dawson's office. Wanted, Clara Mercer, age 23, escaped from custody in Boston, Massachusetts. Diagnosed with acute hysteria and delusions of medical competence. Dangerous to herself and others. May be using aliases including Clara Brown. Reward $200. Contact Judge H. Whitfield, Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory. Sheriff Dawson read it slowly. Clara Brown, he said. That's the woman staying at the Brennan place, Hutchins said. The one who treated the girl. Dawson stood. I'll handle this. But before he could leave, Mr. Garrett from the general store walked in. Sheriff, you seen that telegram about the lunatic? Just got it. She's here, in town, staying at Brennan's. Garrett's face was red. My wife's been talking about how she saved that girl. But she's not a nurse. She's a lunatic, an escaped patient. We don't know that for certain. It says right there she's dangerous. Garrett jabbed a finger at the telegram. What if she'd hurt that child instead of helping her? What if she hurt someone else? By noon, the whole town knew. The woman at Brennan's boarding house was an escaped lunatic from Massachusetts. She'd lied about her name. She was dangerous. She'd been pretending to be a nurse. She could have killed the Brennan girl. By afternoon, the fear had turned to anger. Someone had to do something. Someone had to protect the town. Clara was walking back from the general store when they grabbed her. Mr. Garrett and 2 other men. Hands on her arms, rough and sudden. Hey, shut up. They dragged her into the alley behind the store. Clara's fever made everything swim. She tried to pull away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. More people came. Sheriff Dawson, Mrs. Hollis from the church, a crowd of 15, maybe 20. They formed a circle around her. Clara's back hit the wall. What is this? She demanded. We know who you are, Garrett said. Clara's heart stopped. Clara Mercer, Sheriff Dawson said, holding up the telegram. Escaped from custody in Boston, diagnosed as insane. That's a lie. You lied about your name, Mrs. Hollis said, her voice sharp and righteous. You told Mrs. Brennan you were Clara Brown. You pretended to be a nurse, Garrett said. You could have killed that child. I saved her, Clara's voice cracked. She was dying, and I saved her. You're a lunatic, someone in the crowd shouted. Dangerous, another voice added. She should be locked up. She should be marked. Clara looked around the circle of faces. Ordinary people, shopkeepers, mothers, fathers, all looking at her like she was a monster. I'm not insane, Clara said. Her voice was steady despite the fever, despite the fear. That telegram is a lie. My uncle wants my inheritance. He's been hunting me for 3 years. Delusions, Mrs. Hollis said, shaking her head. Just like the telegram said. I'm not. Someone get some rope, Garrett said. No. Sheriff Dawson stepped forward. We'll take her to Cheyenne. Let Judge Whitfield deal with her. Whitfield's the one hunting me. Clara's voice rose. He's been sending those telegrams everywhere. He's working with my uncle. More delusions, Mrs. Hollis said. She pulled something from her apron. Scissors, long, sharp, gleaming in the winter light. Lunatics should be marked, she said, so decent people know to stay away. Clara's blood turned to ice. Don't! Hands grabbed her, shoved her to her knees. The ground was frozen, hard as stone. Pain shot through her legs. She tried to stand, but someone pushed her down, held her. Mrs. Hollis stepped forward with the scissors. Hold still, she said. No. The first cut was brutal. A chunk of Clara's hair fell to the ground. Then another. And another. The crowd watched in silence. Some looked satisfied. Some looked uncomfortable. None of them stopped it. Clara's hands were pinned behind her back. Her father's bag lay in the dirt beside her. The scissors kept cutting. Snip, snip, snip. This is what happens to liars, Mrs. Hollis said. To lunatics, Garrett added. To women who forget their place, someone else muttered. Clara's vision blurred. Fever, rage, exhaustion. She could give up. She could beg. She could apologize for crimes she didn't commit. But her father's voice was in her head. Do not look away from pain, Clara. Learn from it. She lifted her chin, met Mrs. Hollis's eyes. I'm not insane, Clara said clearly. And you know it. Mrs. Hollis's hand faltered. You know I saved that child, Clara continued. You know I'm not dangerous. You're doing this because a telegram told you to, because it's easier to believe a lie than to think for yourselves. Shut up, Garrett said. You're cowards, Clara said. Her voice didn't shake. All of you. If you think these townspeople are about to regret what they've done, comment karma below and subscribe to see justice served. That's enough. The voice came from the mouth of the alley. Deep, steady, cold as winter steel. The crowd turned. A man stood there. Tall, broad-shouldered, gray eyes that missed nothing. His hand rested on the gun at his hip. Step away from her, he said. This isn't your business, Holbrook, Sheriff Dawson said. I'm making it my business. The man, Holbrook, walked forward slowly. Let her go. She's a fugitive. She's a woman on her knees with scissors at her head. Holbrook's voice was quiet, but it carried. And you're all standing here watching like it's a Sunday social. The telegram says, I don't care what the telegram says. Holbrook stopped a few feet from Clara. I care what I see, and what I see is a mob attacking a sick woman who saved a child's life. She's dangerous, Mrs. Hollis said, but her voice wavered. She looks real dangerous, Holbrook said dryly, looking at Clara on her knees, feverish and exhausted. Terrifying, even. Some of the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Judge Whitfield, Dawson started, can come talk to me if he has a problem. Holbrook's hand stayed on his gun. Now let her go. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Garrett released Clara's arms. She slumped forward, catching herself on her hands. Holbrook stepped closer. Can you stand? He asked Clara. She looked up at him. A stranger, a man she'd never seen before, offering his hand. Why are you helping me? She whispered. Because it's the right thing to do. His gray eyes held hers. Can you stand? Clara took his hand. His grip was strong, steady, warm. He pulled her to her feet. She swayed, and he caught her elbow. Easy. Clara bent and picked up her father's bag. Her hair, what was left of it, hung in jagged chunks around her face. Holbrook looked at the crowd. Anyone else want to play hero today? He asked. No one answered. Good. He turned to Clara. You're coming with me. Clara nodded. She didn't have the strength to argue. Didn't have anywhere else to go. Holbrook kept his hand on her elbow as they walked out of the alley. The crowd parted. No one tried to stop them. Clara didn't look back. She'd spent 3 years looking back. 3 years running. 3 years being hunted, humiliated, broken down piece by piece. But something had changed in that alley. Something had shifted when this stranger, Holbrook, had walked in and said, enough. When he'd looked at her and seen a person, not a lunatic. When he'd offered his hand. Clara didn't know who he was, didn't know why he'd helped her. But as they walked away from the alley, away from the crowd, away from the scissors and the lies and the hatred, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Not hope, exactly, but something close. The possibility of it. That was 3 days ago. 3 days since Nate Holbrook pulled her out of that alley. 3 days since she stopped running and started fighting. 3 days since she found the telegram in Mrs. Brennan's boarding house and realized the full scope of Whitfield's web. Now, riding through the Wyoming night toward Cambridge to find Nate's lawyer friend, Clara touched the back of her neck. Her hair was still short, jagged, uneven. A reminder of what they'd tried to do to her. A reminder of what she'd survived. Nate rode beside her, silent and steady. He'd asked for nothing, demanded nothing, just offered his hand and said, "You're coming with me." Clara didn't know why he'd done it, didn't know what he wanted. But she knew one thing. She was done being the woman on her knees, Done being the fugitive, the lunatic, the victim. Whitfield had spent 3 years hunting her with telegrams and lies. Silas had spent 3 years trying to erase her. They'd both made the same mistake. They'd assumed she would break, but Clara Mercer, daughter of Dr. Thomas Mercer, had learned something in that alley. She'd learned that pain was a teacher, and she'd been an excellent student. Now it was time to teach them a lesson, and she was going to make sure they never forgot it. This is how it ends. Clara thought it as the scissors cut through her hair. 3 years of running, 3 years of fighting, and this is where it stops. In an alley in Wyoming Territory, on her knees in the frozen dirt, surrounded by people who believed a telegram over their own eyes. She'd saved a child, and they were punishing her for it. The scissors kept cutting. Snip, snip, snip. Clara stopped struggling. What was the point? She could fight, scream, beg. But she'd been fighting for 3 years, and it had gotten her nowhere. She'd run from Boston to Denver to Omaha to here. She'd changed her name a dozen times. She'd hidden, lied, disappeared. And Whitfield's telegrams had found her, anyway. They always found her. She thought of her father, his funeral, the rain. Silas's false sympathy. She thought of the night she'd run, the men in white coats, the asylum wagon, her desperate flight through Boston's dark streets. She thought of every town she'd fled, every job she'd lost, every person who'd looked at her with suspicion, fear, hatred, every betrayal, every closed door, every lie that followed her like a shadow. 3 years for nothing. Mrs. Hollis grabbed another chunk of hair. Lunatics should be marked, she said. Clara closed her eyes. Let them. She was done. She'd go to the asylum. She'd disappear into Whitfield's system. She'd become the lunatic they all believed she was. Maybe it would be easier that way. Maybe fighting was the real insanity. Maybe her father had been wrong. Maybe some pain didn't teach you anything. Maybe some pain just broke you. The scissors touched her scalp. Clara stopped breathing. This is how it ends. Not with a fight, not with defiance. With surrender. With scissors and dirt and the cold Wyoming wind. With the knowledge that she would never be safe, never be believed, never be... That's enough. The voice cut through the alley like a blade. Deep, steady, cold. Clara's eyes opened. She didn't turn, didn't dare hope. Probably just another townsperson coming to watch. This isn't your business, Holbrook, the sheriff said. Holbrook. Clara didn't know the name. I'm making it my business, the voice said. Let her go. Clara's heart stuttered. Let her go. No, that wasn't how this worked. No one helped her. No one intervened. No one. She's a fugitive. She's a woman on her knees with scissors at her head. Clara turned her head slightly. Through the crowd, she saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, gray eyes that looked like winter steel. His hand rested on his gun. He was looking at the crowd. Then his eyes found hers, and Clara forgot how to breathe, because he wasn't looking at her like she was a lunatic, or a fugitive, or a problem to be solved. He was looking at her like she was a person, like she mattered. I don't care what the telegram says, the man, Holbrook, said. I care what I see, and what I see is a mob attacking a sick woman who saved a child's life. Clara's vision blurred. Fever or tears. She couldn't tell anymore. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. She was hallucinating. Delirious from the fever, because strangers didn't help, didn't intervene, didn't risk themselves for women they didn't know. She's dangerous, Mrs. Hollis said. Holbrook looked at Clara. Kneeling, feverish, exhausted. Hair hacked short. Father's bag in the dirt beside her. She looks real dangerous, he said dryly. Terrifying even. Clara almost laughed. Almost, but she'd forgotten how. The crowd shifted. Uncomfortable, uncertain. Holbrook's hand stayed on his gun. Now let her go, he said. It wasn't a request. The hands holding Clara released. She slumped forward, catching herself on her palms. The ground was so cold. Everything was cold, except, "Can you stand?" Clara looked up. Holbrook stood above her, hand extended, offering, waiting. Clara stared at his hand. This is a trick. He'll pull it away, or he'll help her up and then turn her over to the sheriff. Or he wants something. Everyone wants something. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. "Because it's the right thing to do." His voice was quiet, honest, devastating. Clara's hand shook as she reached for his. His grip was strong, steady, warm. He pulled her to her feet. The world tilted. She swayed. He caught her elbow. Easy. Clara bent and grabbed her father's bag. Her legs barely held her. Holbrook kept his hand on her elbow. "You're coming with me," he said. Not a question, a statement, a promise. Clara nodded. She didn't have the strength to argue, didn't have anywhere else to go, didn't have anything left except the bag in her hand and the stranger beside her. They walked out of the alley. The crowd parted. Clara didn't look at them, didn't have the energy. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on not collapsing, on the warm, steady hand at her elbow, on the impossible fact that someone had helped her. If you believe Clara deserves this second chance, comment HOPE below, and subscribe to see her take back her life. Holbrook had a horse. He lifted Clara into the saddle like she weighed nothing. She didn't remember the ride, only fragments. The movement of the horse, the cold wind. Holbrook's voice, low and steady. Almost there. Then a cabin, small, warm, safe. Holbrook helped her inside, settled her on a bed, covered her with blankets. "Sleep," he said. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to ask questions, wanted to understand why he was doing this, but her body had other ideas. She fell asleep before he left the room. She woke to firelight and silence. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it came back. The alley, the scissors, the stranger. Holbrook. Clara sat up slowly. Her fever had broken. Her body ached, but the crushing exhaustion was gone. How long had she slept? She looked around. The cabin was small but well kept. A fire burned in the hearth. A cup of water sat on the table beside the bed. And Holbrook sat in a chair by the fire, reading. He looked up when she moved. "You're awake." Clara's throat was dry. She reached for the water and drank. "How long?" she asked. 18 hours. Clara blinked. 18 hours. She hadn't slept that long in 3 years. "You should eat," Holbrook said. He stood and ladled something from a pot over the fire. "It's just broth, but it'll help." He brought her the bowl. Clara took it with shaking hands. She waited for him to ask, to demand, to explain what he wanted in return for this kindness. But he just sat back down and picked up his book. Clara ate slowly. The broth was warm, simple, good. When she finished, she set the bowl aside. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Holbrook closed his book. He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I know what it's like when powerful men decide you're in their way," he said quietly. "And I know what it costs to stand alone." Clara's chest tightened. "What happened?" "My brother." Holbrook's voice was flat, controlled. "He stood up to the wrong man, a judge with connections. They hanged him for a crime he didn't commit." Clara's breath caught. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Holbrook's gray eyes met hers. "I couldn't save him, but I can help you." Clara looked down at her hands. 3 years of running. 3 years of trusting no one. 3 years of believing she was alone. And now this stranger, this man who'd lost his brother to the same kind of injustice, was offering to help. It didn't make sense. People didn't do this, didn't risk themselves for strangers, didn't believe without proof. "I'm not insane," Clara said quietly. "I know. Everything in that telegram is a lie. I know. My uncle wants my inheritance. He's been hunting me for 3 years. Judge Whitfield is helping him. They've been sending telegrams across the country, spreading lies, making sure I can never stop running." Clara's voice cracked. "And I don't know how to prove it anymore. I don't know how to fight them. I don't know. She stopped, took a breath. I don't know how to do this alone. It was the first time she'd said it out loud, the first time she'd admitted it, that she was tired, that she was scared, that she needed help. Holbrook leaned forward. Then we'll prove it together, he said. You're not alone anymore. Clara looked at him. This stranger who'd walked into an alley and said, enough. Who'd faced down a mob for a woman he didn't know. Who'd brought her to safety and asked for nothing. Who believed her. She wanted to trust him, wanted to believe this was real. But 3 years of betrayal had taught her to be careful. Why should I trust you? She asked. You shouldn't. Holbrook's voice was honest, blunt. You don't know me. I could be lying. I could be working with Whitfield. I could turn you in tomorrow. Clara's stomach dropped. But I won't. Holbrook continued. Because I meant what I said. I know what it's like to watch powerful men destroy good people, and I swore I'd never let it happen again if I could stop it. He stood and walked to the window. I can't give you proof that I'm trustworthy, he said. Only time will do that, but I can give you a choice. He turned back to her. You can rest here tonight, and tomorrow I'll take you wherever you want to go. No questions, no strings. You can keep running if that's what you need to do. He paused. Or you can stay, and we can fight together. I know a lawyer in Cambridge, a good one. We can gather witnesses, prove you're competent, expose Whitfield's lies and your uncle's greed, make them answer for what they've done. Clara's heart pounded. Run or fight, survive or live, hide or stand. She thought of her father. Do not look away from pain, Clara. Learn from it. She'd been looking away for 3 years, running from the pain, hiding from it, letting it chase her across the country. But pain had found her anyway, in every town, every job, every alley. And she'd learned something in that alley in Stillwater Creek. She'd learned that surrender didn't end the pain. It just made you smaller. Clara looked at Holbrook, this man who'd offered his hand when she was on her knees, who'd seen her when everyone else saw a lunatic, who'd given her a choice when she thought she had none left. She could run. She was good at running, but she was tired. So tired. And for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't alone. I'll stay, Clara said. Her voice was quiet but steady. I'll fight. Holbrook nodded. Then we start tomorrow. Clara lay back down. The fire crackled. The cabin was warm, safe. For the first time in 3 years, Clara closed her eyes without fear, without listening for footsteps, without planning her escape. She closed her eyes and slept. And when she woke the next morning, Holbrook was still there, still keeping watch, still believing her. That's when Clara understood. Everything had changed. Not in the alley when he'd pulled her to her feet, but here, in this moment, when she'd chosen to trust, to fight, to stop surviving and start living. She'd spent 3 years running from pain. Now she would run toward justice, and she wouldn't run alone. Clara Mercer, daughter of Dr. Thomas Mercer, sat up. She looked at the man by the fire. Where do we start? She asked. Holbrook smiled. It was small, grim, determined. We start by making them regret they ever came after you. Clara smiled back. It felt strange on her face, like a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. But it felt right. Good, she said. And for the first time in 3 years, Clara believed it. Everything was going to be good. Not easy, not safe, but good. Because she wasn't the woman who'd knelt in that alley anymore. She was the woman who'd stood up, and she was done kneeling.